work that is so often rooted in the work of the Soviet avant-garde. But anyway, I think what we'll do is that we'll start the presentation and I'll take it from there. Okay. So I'm sharing screen. You should be able to see a gorgeous red on your screen right now. Can you see a gorgeous red on
No,
your screen?
we are
No,
seeing gorgeous
Teams.
The
Teams.
Teams window.
That is just disgusting. That is nothing like a gorgeous red. Sorry. And I had such high hopes for that red.
Let the gorgeous red.
Yes,
Ah,
there
There
it
on a
is.
gorgeous red, like it burns, doesn't it? It's not really a Soviet red. This is a little more pink.
Yeah,
But I
this is more
decided to
like the
queer up
Chinese,
also.
Rohan.
Huh?
It's more
So
like the Chinese red.
it's more like a Chinese red, exactly. The Soviet red would be a little darker.
Yeah.
So what we've been doing so far, just we've been taking a trip after we started off in the United States of America. We decided to take a little trip in Europe, and we've been looking at Europe in the first half of the 20th century. Actually, not just the first half, but actually literally almost the first 20 years of the 20th century. And we saw the Art Nouveau movement in Paris. We saw the Vienna Secession in Vienna. We saw that Gaudi's work in Barcelona, and then we spent actually some time, 2 weeks, I think, in Berlin, where we looked at both the Expressionists as well as the Bauhaus in the second time. Now, parallel to all of this, there's something really dramatic happening in Russia, and this entire kind of enormous country that is forged out of all of these different sorts of landscapes and countries into one large nation, the USSR. And this country is actually in the process of being born at the same time in the early years of the 20th century. And as you all know, this is a communist country. And it lasted until what? The late 90s. No, sorry, late 80s, right? And since then, that's been the break of the Soviet bloc. But when I was growing up, there were always two great superpowers: the United States of America, which claimed that it represented the free world, and the USSR, which I guess in many ways claimed that it represented a more egalitarian society. So what we're going to do is that we're going to kind of take a look a little bit at this chart for now. So this is literally just the first 50 years. Oh, you guys can't see it now. Oh, I have to fit slide. Damn. Can you guys see the screen? No. Oh yeah, just about, right? Yeah. So
Yeah, we
you
can see
have
this.
you can see the screen. No, no, I was having a little bit of an issue with with the sizing of the window. Is that this is the first 50 years of the 20th century. And as you guys know, World War One, 1914 to 1918, 1939 to 1945 is World War Two. Okay, and it is during World War One, at the end of which, that the USSR is born. But there is a time before that where there's a revolution of 1905 that also happens in Russia. So we will, in the beginning, talk a little bit about the history of the Russian Revolution in a very loose way, unfortunately, because after all, this is a theory of design course and not a history course, though I highly recommend that you learn more about it because it is an extraordinary story. Yeah. This is what is called the revolution. We'll come to that later. Actually, I won't get into that right now. Right? And just to kind of give you an idea about what is happening parallelly around the world at the same time, you have, it's in this period that you have, of course, that famous essay by Adolf Loos called Ornament is Crime, that's written in 1910. The Destile movement is happening actually almost at the same time as the October Revolution in Russia. Okay, and the Bauhaus is born literally almost a year after, or maybe even the year, actually a year after the Second World War, the First World Wars, and of course it ends when Hitler comes to power in Germany. This is the first period, which is, I guess, from 1917 to 1924, is what is called the revolutionary period generally in Russia. And it was in this period that Lenin was the head of the Bolshevik party and in many ways was heading the USSR. It is after Lenin dies that you have the rise of the next leader, whose name is Stalin, who has actually his reign lasts until he dies, which is in 1953. Okay, they're not going to go beyond that in this lecture. We will probably go after 1953 in the next week, in the 2 weeks from now. Yeah. Just to give you a sense as to the nature of the time that we are looking at. Yeah. So the first revolution. So you have to understand that that the Russians and the Japanese went to war in 1904 and 1905. It is in that war that the Russians were actually badly defeated. And this is maybe one of the first instances where a European power, which can claim that it had a certain of superior knowledge in every way, was defeated by an Asian power. So it was a great thing for the Japanese, who felt an incredible sense of achievement, but it was also very humiliating for the Russians. And because of that, there was a great deal of dissatisfaction in Russia with this man and his family. This is the king, Nicholas II, I believe. I think that's his name. Yeah, this is the reign of Nicholas II, right? And this is his family. There's some great stories around his family and the princess and the kind of a man called Rasputin. All of these amazing stories are there, which we don't have time to get into. All I need to tell you that is that the head of the place that Nicholas and his family were living was in this palace, which is in a city called St. Petersburg. Okay. As you can see, it's a lavish sort of palace, and they were, and this country was the serfs or the peasants who worked on the land had been set free. But I think around 30 to 40 years later. However, they continued to live in the most horrific sort of bondage. They were not able to. There was terrible starvation and poverty that was happening at that time. So while the middle class was dissatisfied because with the Tsar because they had suffered a humiliating defeat, you also had the peasants who were in a terrible state. Yet the palace itself was lush, very, very ornate, and it seemed as if the gap between the landowners and the peasants was increasing, or the landed and the nobility and the peasants was increasing, because this was the ways in which the peasants were living. These are some photographs from the 1890s, I think, that I found online that was showing the state of the peasants and the workers within. I'm still wondering what this image is actually. It's such a fascinating image. I have no idea what it is. And terrible living conditions even in the cities. At the same time, Russia had industrialized, but really, the working conditions were terrible. People were living in the cities, so there was a great deal of unrest there as well. There was also a workers' movement that was happening. That is the king, that's the Tsar, and this is the way that he was worshipped literally by the army. But there was a great deal of dissatisfaction with that entire thing, especially because Russia was pulled into the war by the Tsar. And it is during that time that a lot of I mean, this is later, of course, and but a lot of kind of anger, etc., starts at that time, and that leads, of course, to the rise of the Communist Party. The character that really heads the communist movement in Russia is this man called Vladimir Lenin, and I've just taken a little kind of clipping from an essay actually that he's written called "What Is to Be Done." It's sort of a heroic imagination. He says, "What is to be done?" In which he says that it's not going to become possible that workers who are used to kind of thinking in a certain way are spontaneously going to become Marxists, okay, because they're too busy caught up with their everyday lives, okay. He says that there is a duty that the bourgeoisie or the what he calls the kind of the like people like him, educated middle class people, who would then take upon the role through which that they would then educate the working classes in their rights, and they would then form a party, a vanguard party that would then spread communism around the world. And this is literally what became a really important thing for us to think about, is that the workers movement was not necessarily led only by the workers themselves. There was always a class of people, bourgeois intellectuals, who in many ways spoke as almost ventriloquists for what the workers were demanding. It reminded me again of this Nietzschean imagination that we've spoken of a little earlier, of this idea of the Superman, Lenin as Superman, that this new Soviet man, this Superman, would be one who would be this incredible sort of intellectual, would have hard work, would have the best kind of morals, and it was in some senses a sort of pure imagination of this sort of creature that was being created, and who would then lead kind of Russia into communism. It reminded me literally of this myth, this famous Greek myth that we have, kind of, that you may have heard, or the word you may have heard, which is called Promethean. Now, Prometheus was a god. We've met Apollo and Dionysus earlier, but now we'll meet Prometheus. And we met Icarus also, if I believe. Prometheus was the guy who made humanity from clay and stole fire from the gods, okay, and gave it to the humans. Okay, so in many ways, Prometheus is the one who is stealing fire from the gods and bringing it to the humans and giving them life. So it's like literally the birth of God, birth of man. But the gods are really unhappy about this. So to punish him, they tie him to a stake and gets and an eagle kind of comes every day and eats his liver. And at night, the liver would grow back. So he's in perpetual pain. Understand? So there is this sort of perpetual trauma that this person is going to, and the reason why he's going through that trauma is because he had the audacity to bring progress to mankind. So there is in this imagination of the Superman a certain kind of self-sacrificing martyrdom, that this person is the one who's going to be, who has the duty to be able to suffer so that other people can benefit. So Lenin writes, his essay in 1901, and in 1905 there's a revolution, like I said. Okay, and what happens at the end of the revolution? There are some sorts of changes that are made to the way that Russia is governed, but still there's a great deal of disenchantment with the fact that in 1914 Russia goes to war under the Tsar. And that, of course, leads to all of these incredible movements where the Tsar is deposed and the Tsar is killed in 1918. This is the room in which the Tsar and his entire family were executed. It's an incredible photograph. I mean, just look at these bullet holes in the walls. It's a little scary. But this is also the time when when the new Bolsheviks, when the Bolshevik party comes to power, they start taking the first measures of what can be called the creation of a communist society. And the first thing that they do is they say that there is no private property. So everybody's land then becomes state land. Okay, they nationalize every single industry within the country. They get rid of money that used to exist earlier and replace it with tokens. And they start imagining that the entire national economy can work under one simple plan. And this leads to a complete sort of chaos, really. That peasants begin to hoard, everyone's unsure about the money. I mean, it's like really crazy, that this sudden kind of random, incredibly violent shifts and changes are happening, and done by a small party of people in Moscow for this entire country. It's quite a ambitious and audacious enterprise. And to be able to get people to fall in line, as many of us are familiar with, there is a very, very well coordinated system of identifying those who are called, who they call as reactionaries, and kind of something anti-revolutionaries or something. That's the word. Anyway, I can't remember the word itself. And they are then targeted as people who are, and there of course exist. There are people who continue to support the Tsar, for example. So a great war begins, and this war is called the Red Terror, between what are called the Reds, or the people who are supporting the communists, and the Whites, which are people who are supporting the Tsar. And I mean, it's a horrific story of murder, of dispossession, and of violence. Yeah. This this kind of idea, it becomes this, and slowly slowly also what happens at this time is that it's imagined that the Comintern. The Comintern is actually the gathering of all the Communist International, I guess is what Comintern stands for. So the Comintern takes upon the idea that communism cannot only happen only in Russia. Communism needs to spread around the world. The communist, like I'm reading this directly, which says the Communist International breaks for once and for all with the traditions of the Second International, for which in reality only people with white skin exist. The task of the Communist International is to liberate the workers of the whole world. In its ranks, the peoples of white, yellow, and black races, the workers of the world, are finally fraternally united. So there is this sort of almost proselytizing zeal that they want to take communism, which Russia has created and enjoyed so much, and take it around the world, break the shackles of kind of old feudal kinds of society, and kind of create a completely new world. So that was the first phase, this entire imagination of that happens in the Red Terror under Lenin. But after seeing that this kind of violence was really not kind of useful, in 1921, Lenin introduces what is called the New Economic Policy, the NEP. And in this, he seems to kind of step back from many of the things that he had started off with in the early years of the communist state. He starts encouraging small-scale private parties to do trade, and peasants were allowed to trade in their own goods. So there is in many ways a sort of dealing between the truly public and the private. So the private is allowed to in many ways participate in the economy, and that immediately begins to stabilize things. Things start to become in many ways better. An important thing that also happens with the NEP, and which has far-reaching consequences, especially for us in India, is there is this idea of the 5-year plan. A 5-year plan is put in place that we take on when we have our when we start our kind of when we become independent, in other words. And of course, we take that as these 5-year plans where where the state decides this is where we are going to focus our economy. Yeah. But we are really talking about art and architecture. This is just to give you a sort of background. Yeah. One of the most important exhibitions that have happened in the entire of the 20th century is this one. It's called the 0.01 exhibition that happened in 1915. The reason why this is an extremely important exhibition is because it sets in it actually sets the ball rolling for two extraordinarily important architectural and art movements: constructivism and suprematism. Okay, it was called the last futurist exhibition of painting, or 0.1010. So as you can see, it's called the last futurist exhibition, which means that it had a sort of apocalyptic imagination to it. It was literally the end of something and the beginning of something new. It really wanted to, in many ways, redefine what constitutes art entirely. And there are two characters whom we will both follow in different lectures, and the movements that they spawned in 2 different lectures. The two of them are Kazimir Malevich and Vladimir Tatlin. Malevich is largely known as somebody who started the movement of suprematism, and Vladimir Tatlin is one who is iconic and representative of what is called the constructivist movements. These are all the other people who also presented at that 0.15 exhibition. So we are going to start off with constructivism, actually. Sorry, suprematism, and we're going to start off with Malevich. Now, Malevich, is I think an extremely important thinker for architecture as well as art, and we can discuss exactly how in a few minutes, right? But this is his exhibition at the 0.10 exhibition, which are actually just these large paintings of just bands of color. Okay, purely abstracted from any sort of representation besides the representation of color itself. And what you have here is this painting up here that you're seeing on the corner up there. Now, this was traditionally a place that if you went to older Russian homes, this was a place where the icon of I mean, Russia has a great iconographic tradition, but the icons used to be of Christ and Mother Mary, etc. used to be placed at the top corner here. Okay, what you have, sorry, did I lose you guys? Sorry, I think I lost you guys. I'll have to reshare the.
Yeah.
Sorry, something happened. Can you guys see it now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Yeah. And so and instead of that icon, what you have here is a black square. This painting, a painting that is well, you know, it's deceptively simple looking because it does change the entire direction of modern art. You have to understand this is 1915. Okay. Wow. What Malevich is trying to do here, and this is yet another painting which is called Red Square, and this painting is called Peasant Woman. I mean, do you see a peasant woman anywhere here? So obviously there is a sort of ironic kind of take upon what is being shown, okay, or what is being said. Right? Another famous painting is this one, which is white on white, suprematist composition. Now, the suprematists also wrote a manifesto a little later on in 1926, and I'm just taking a little clip from there to really talk about how they were imagining their work. Under suprematism, I understand the supremacy of pure feeling in creative art. To suprematists, the visual phenomena of the objective world are in themselves meaningless. The significant thing is feeling as such, quite apart from the environment in which it is called forth. So the idea here, if you think about even I mean, for me, I mean, this is purely my own personal sort of analysis of this. If I think about the idea of feeling that was there, let's say in the German expressionists that we saw 2 weeks back, where the idea of the expressions was the kind of over kind of expressions of light and shadow, turns, twists, you know, all that sort of hyper sort of movement in the architecture. That is all denied entirely. Instead of that kind of feeling, it is imagined that in the pure abstraction of color itself, there is feeling. And that in many ways reminds me a little bit about the Bauhaus, you know, the sort of abstraction imagination that exists. Because what this painting is that the painting is nothing else except itself. Even the titles are white on white. It describes the painting. There's nothing beyond it. It is not showing a picture of glasses. It's not even showing, let's say, emotions like calmness or whatever those things are, because those are not even the titles. The titles are just straightforward. This is white on white. This is black. This is, well, this is ironically called Peasant Woman because it's not there. Okay, so its title is what is not there. Okay, and you have more here. Suprematist paintings, 8 red rectangles. That's what this one is. I think you can see it here somewhere. Yeah, this one, right? Or this one, which is 4 squares. So you have these sorts of things that are happening. Now, this sort of purity that this represents, a purity, is seen as something that, you know, is a cleansing sort of imagination of everything that has happened before. And it is imagined that the new Soviet man would absolutely adore this sort of cleansing. You know, that is the imagination. There were plays that were put up where suprematist art was I mean, this is called The Victory Over the Sun, which is a famous play, I guess, and where the costumes, etc., the backdrops were all designed by Malevich as a way to kind of stage the first what you call the futurist opera. And it was not only in the two-dimensional that many of these experiments happened. They also happened in 3 dimensions. These are what are called architectons. So as much as black painting was about the two-dimensional surface, where he was trying to in many ways figure out the zero, you know, the beginning, the end of all painting is the black square. So in many ways, he's also trying to discover what is the zero in architecture. Okay? Suppose you remove everything of architecture, what is it that stays basically fundamental to it? And what he arrives at are these sorts of assemblages of abstract forms. largely cuboidal, that are all assembled together, which seem to be sort of reminiscent to me of some of the skyscrapers that we saw when we were looking at the Chicago work, or even some of the compositions for me look like some of the Frank Lloyd Wright sorts of buildings. Like that one on the left reminds me vaguely of the compositions of something like the Imperial Hotel that Wright built in Japan. So these are made out of plaster, similar like these rectangular blocks put together to make these spatializations, just pure abstract imaginations of form. Look at that. That really does look very Frank Lloyd Wright to me, you know. And these were then imagined as the what can we call the zero of architecture. So this urge that is there within modernity to be able to remove all excess, to be able to find the basic, the pure, okay, is something that is very, very essential to suprematist art and begins to travel, of course, around the world. You have to understand that 1915 is still before the Bauhaus has been established in Berlin. Yeah. Uh, Maybe I should just read this, right? Suprematism. So this is Malevich talking about painting and the problem of architecture in 1928. Suprematism has two methods on revealing the elements of perception: the spatial method and the easel method. Space and canvas are the places where they appear. The problem of form has played and still plays an immense part in suprematist art. Without it, it is impossible to reveal any of the elements of perception: color, dynamic, static, mechanical, motive, etc. It can thus be seen that the first essential is to create one objective element of form, with the help of which one can express perceptions by changing the relationship of one to the other. So the idea is to reduce everything to its one basic thing and then allow it to kind of be seen in different ways. So, you know, the thing is that Malevich was very, very influential, and primarily he was influential because he was also a teacher. He taught at what was called the Videbsk Art School in 1919, and it was called UNOVIS. It was a group of people, like we've been discussing, this urge of early 20th century art and architects to create groups, and this was no less. This is one of them. It's called UNOVIS. Malevich is here standing in the middle with that circular plate with the circle and the square in the middle, right? And its idea was for this entire group was to take suprematism away from the art gallery into where it was generally found and be able to move it into the real world, for suprematist design to be part of building the new Soviet world, and therefore it had a political organization. So I'm going to read again this organization of design work. So this is what they were trying to do: an organization of design work for new types of useful structures and requirements and implementation, the formulation of tasks of new architecture, elaboration of new ornamentation, designs of monument decoration. So they're really seeing all the work that they are doing as being as being essential to the great nation building project of the Soviet Union. And the seal that they had for the entire school was actually Malevich's famous black square. Great logo, actually, if you ask me. A person who was a devotee, I guess, of Malevich was this man called L. Lissitzky. L. Lissitzky, you know, also traveled the world later on. I think he was highly influential in the Bauhaus too later on. And in it, and here you're seeing a work that he's done, which is this famous poster, like one of those famous posters that were made in the 20th century, which was made during the Red Terror. Okay. Where you have, its title is Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge. So whites, you remember, were the people who are supporting the Tsar, and the red triangle is communism, and the Red Army, which is then you know, fighting and entering literally the whites and, I guess, killing them. Uh, but Malevich also did kinds of some drawings and posters for that play that we saw earlier, Victory Over the Sun. I'm just going to show you some of these because you'll realize the way that the images and the forms and these sorts of how should I say, geometries and graphic design is extremely, well, it's beautiful, and it's also extremely influential for the whole of the 20th century. Uh, one of the, so this little thing that says here, for example, okay, which is interesting. The caption says, all is well that begins well and has not ended. So this idea that one can achieve a final stage is itself seen as something that we need to deny. There is an idea that everything is constantly moving, and we need to enjoy the fact that things are moving, that things are constantly in a dynamic state of affairs. And in the drawings, you see those sorts of these are the way in which Lissitzky gives propositions for the characters of the play. The sentry, the announcer, the grave digger. And you can see the fact that each of these is an extremely architectural composition. This is the new man with his dynamic movement, and this is the troublemaker. The same set of simple colors, black, red, gray, white, is composed into these forms, these dynamic moving forms. But Lissitzky also worked with architecture. In a sense, he worked with three-dimensionality. Indeed, three-dimensionality is what we call architecture. He had this entire set of drawings as well as models that he made, artworks that he made, that were called prouns. And if Malevich had his Architectons, Lissitzky's prouns were these sort of, I guess you could call it cuboidal compositions. But his cuboidal compositions were a little more, were much more dynamic, I would say, than Malevich's. While Malevich's was about purity and that, and the cuboid and the constant manipulation of that. What happens with Lissitzky is that the forms are no longer stable. They are in constant movement with each other. They are very often built within rooms so that they can in many ways dispel some of the dynamics of the rooms. And these are some of the images that you'll see of these drawings, or of some of the prouns. And what is interesting for me about these prouns is the fact that they are extraordinarily architectural and become so important to the way that even what modern architecture really sort of engages with for almost its entire history. These forms floating in space, forms purified, cleansed, singular colors, singular materials, floating in a sort of emptiness, as if the city doesn't exist. All that exists is ground and sky. There is that imagination that is so endemic to these drawings. Another image that you can see of which is called town. Now, I mean, imagine this as a town where if this is a housing blocks, let's say, I don't even know what these are, right? But it's imagine that this entire thing is a town, a circle within which the entire town exists, two flat planes that are reaching out. I presume that there are fields outside and the circle is the town. And these dynamic sorts of diagonals in yellow that are breaking the sort of the grid of the building. Another sketch for a brown. So all of these, for me, when I was reading this, I realized just how much of our basic design imaginations or even sometimes architectural design imaginations seem to be so influenced by this sort of architecture, where we take volumes and we compose them over and over again, thinking that is the job of what architects do. It seems to me that Malevich's ghost continues to haunt our design processes even today. And I do have issues with that too. Okay. But of course, the suprematists were supposed to participate in the building of Soviet Russia. So you have these sorts of towers that are made for, you can see Lenin standing here to give a speech, I guess, and a projection at the back, staircase to go up. So you have, I mean, this is Lissitzky again. Sorry. This is Lissitzky again, who's building these monuments for the transformation of Russia. Another famous drawing project by Lissitzky. As you know, the whole of modern history constitutes of these amazing drawing projects that were supposed to transform the world. So this is a famous drawing project that was called Cloud Iron, and it was Lissitzky's response to a Moscow that was getting crowded, and his idea was, of course, lift people up into the sky and connect them with metro lines or connect them with tram services. So these are the drawings. You can see one drawing on the left, and this is a photo montage that is inserted, I presume, in Moscow, but I wouldn't know. And other people were also influenced by him. You can see this. This looks pretty much like one of the Malevich sorts of imaginations for Architecton. And you have people like these. Look at this. This literally looks like a building that I might be designed in LSR in even today, unfortunately. Just this composition of volumes. Actually, I would say that even somebody like what's his name? Kanvinde may be kind of influenced by these, or maybe the Bauhaus was influenced by this, which is also possible.
Bauhaus,
Maybe there was, yeah, there wasn't that a Bauhaus. Doesn't it look very Bauhausian?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was a very sort of productive exchange of ideas that ran from Berlin to Moscow, and maybe they were constantly influencing each other too. Except that what happened, of course, in the way that we wrote our architectural histories, in India, we were probably as influenced by the Russians as much as we were by the Americans. But that narrative has not been told of the way that Russian sorts of avant-garde art, maybe, we don't know, influenced Indian architecture. This is another work done by a suprematist called Natan Alderman. This is actually a work that he did which was built in reality in the public square in St. Petersburg. It was built as a sort of monument for the Winter Palace in Leningrad. Sorry, Leningrad is St. Petersburg only, no? I think so. I think they renamed it.
It was renamed to Petrograd, if I'm not mistaken, and then probably Leningrad.
Leningrad, yeah. So what I find interesting here is this, right? Is this text where he says each part of a futurist picture acquires meaning only through the interaction of all the other parts. Only in conjunction with them does it acquire the meaning with which the artist imbued it. A futurist picture lives a collective life by the same principle on which the proletariat's whole creation is constructed. Try to distinguish an individual face in the proletarian procession. Try to understand it as an individual person's. It's absurd. Only in conjunction do they acquire all their strength and their meaning. So what seems to be an important thing of this entire imagination is to deny the individual imagination of a creative artist. Instead, the idea is for you to think about art as well as architecture as something that is built in collective, in conversations with the collective. And the architecture and the art itself is supposed to in many ways represent that sorts of imagination of the collective. So this is the set, whatever the monument as it was built. I think it was built for a performance or an event or something like that. I've forgotten because I did the research like 4 months back now, I think. Yeah. Another image of that incredible piece of whatever you may call it, like a brown almost, with the crowds of people in front of it in the public square. Another image of the design around the column. Yeah. So that's actually as far as suprematism is concerned. The next movement that we'll be looking at is what is called constructivism. Should we, what do you guys think? Should we go into it or should we wait a little and maybe do it next week?
Ron, I think we should do it next week.
Okay, I have no issues actually, because that is also quite long. And this much is, I think, is complicated enough to think of, and maybe can come back later. Shravan, do you want to kind of respond maybe next week rather than today, or what do you want to do?
I mean, I do have some responses to what I just saw based on like the class.
But we'll wait for you later. I'll still go to the others first. Okay, Shravan? Because otherwise, it tends to... Anyone else has anything to say, or should we just...
We didn't pick respondents this time. I mean...
Ambika, what is exciting you about the Winter Palace?
Oh, I've been to St. Petersburg twice, so I love the Winter Palace. So I just got excited when I saw the first image. That's about it. I was quite happy with this lecture, and plus I've been watching a few videos on similar topics this past week, so I shared them. Yeah.
I saw that in the chat. In fact, that's a video that we'll be revisiting, I think, 2 weeks from now. It's nicely made, that one. So you've been to St. Petersburg?
Yes, and I absolutely love Russia. So this is quite nice because I was, I think, 12 when I last visited, so I didn't really know much about the political theory, the architecture.
You know, if you love the Winter Palace, I recommend a film by a Russian filmmaker called Alexander Sokurov. It's called Russian Ark.
Okay, all right, I'll check that out.
The whole film is shot in the palace as one long take.
Wow, all right.
It's around an hour where they just move through the whole building. It's quite amazing.
Okay, I'll check that out. Also, I was watching a video, I think, on this Nicholas Tsar the second, and how he was related to the British monarchy and how they didn't really sort of the family in. And I think that was quite an interesting documentary. I'll share that on the group for the rest.
Yeah, do that. It'll be great. Also, the fact that when he was in Japan or something, he was shot at or something like that. And that was his cousin shot at. There's all kinds of, I mean, I can't remember that. But the story is it's full of great detail. The Rasputin story is also great fun, where I think his son was born anemic or something like that. So his wife thought that this strange god man Rasputin would be able to cure him, and that Rasputin guy gained a lot of power in Russia at that time. It's fun.
Yeah, Rasputin pretty much led to the Tsar's downfall because of the propaganda they used with him, and then.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else wants to kind of join in the conversation? Who was this?
Shreya.
Hi, Shreya.
Hi. The prince had hemophilia, so the queen, the imperial couple, thought that he'll be healing their son. And when the king went to the war at that time, the queen and Rasputin grew to a lot of power, which was their downfall later when the Russians lost.
It's quite a story, actually. It's full of drama and great, great historical epic sort of dramas happen. It's quite a thing. Does anyone else want to kind of say something, ask something, clarify something today?
Atharva, go ahead.
Yeah.
Like I saw the prawns and all the pictures related to it, so the prawns was something really similar to one of the electives which was there in last year. I think it was done by some English guy, I don't know. So that was like really same to same, and still we have that idea of we have like an art, and we just like do SketchUp things and like increase it into the volumes.
Yeah. You're telling me I'm going mad with my third year. All of them think that doing SketchUp models is architecture. It's killing me. It's like some terrible imagination of architecture, honestly put. I would say that kind of architecture which has no materiality, no site, no nothing except itself, is a little like I don't know. It's fine when it's just a drawing on a plan somewhere, but drawing somewhere. But when it gets built, it's quite scary. I think, at least, personally. Yeah, but I think it's highly influential, this whole kind of suprematist movement. Anyone else? Should we pick somebody? Sure, let's pick somebody today. Then we'll pick Shravan and we'll give 3 minutes. We'll kind of look for people. Shall
yeah.
Somebody else.
Rohan, I just have to step out. I'll join again. Yeah.
No problem. Yeah. Umair Sheikh. I didn't know there was an Umair Sheikh in your class. Umair, show us your face, my friend. Are you there or not there? Are you here only for attendance, my friend? Umair? Okay. Rahul Sankhe? Is this the way this works actually? No one answers? So, if no one is going to answer, then I don't need to answer either, do I? Either am I, or who's the other guy? Did I just say? One more person I'll picture. Kshitij. Churi. I want to see 3 of your faces. Are you there, Kshitij? Kshitij, are you there?
He's replying on the chat. I don't think.
Is he? Cool. That's nice. Yes, yes. Hello. Nice. Fine, fine. Thank you for being there. You had any questions or comments, Kshitij? Oh, it's fine. At least say yes or no, na. Kuch to yaar. I mean, you can't be. I've never seen. Next year, I'm going to teach you design. I'm going to murder all of it. Bolo.
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Rona. This is Shudit. So my mic was not working.
Right.
Yeah. So we actually in Sem 2, we had an elective where we had this guide called Percy, where we explored suprematism in like making models and exploring all those drawings. And yeah, so I just had to.
Percy Pithawala.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's from Surat, Baroda or someplace, no?
Yeah. We had an elective with him, so yeah, we had explored all these drawings there, and by making all like explorations, 3D explorations with it, and yeah.
But what do you think about it? Do you think it's a good way to explore architecture, or do you think it's a little stupid?
I don't know about how functionally like we can use it, but it kind of created a lot of interesting spaces, but I don't know how to like place functionality in all those explorations. So in terms of making it like a working building, like I'm like doubtful about it.
Yeah, forget the workable building, but did it make, I mean, because you're working with models, are you thinking of
Yeah.
space or you think about form?
Both actually. So we actually explored some like we also like went inside the ground and also dug some things out. So it was kind of creating spaces which there were some narrow spaces. So I had a radial plan in which there were lines which were intersecting in a lot of different angles. And some of them some of them we dug inside below the ground level, and some we explored outside. So like I think so it the form wise also it created a lot of interesting like forms and spaces also. It was good, but yeah, like again as I said, key for a building I'm not sure
I don't know. I mean, if it's making good spaces, then maybe it's all right, yeah, for a building. Function की तो बात की बात है. Functions so later on we can think about, because actually people like Aldo Rossi think that functions are a useless thing anyway. All we need to think is typology. So whatever.
But yeah, it
both
did created a lot of good species.
So you enjoyed doing it?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. Atharva, your hand is still up. Anything you want to ask?
Yeah. No, I just wanted to add to what Kshitij was saying. So, like during that elective, I was with Shirish doing the theater elective. So, like it was all fun for us. So, like हम लोग का हो जाने का, we used to just stand outside the studio and see ki what they are doing. Like for a first year guy, it was like, क्या कर रहे हैं? It didn't make any sense. Absolutely no sense that they are like just making some circles and squares, giving red and yellow color, and then giving them some scale to it.
Yeah, I know. These processes can be a little confusing.
Yeah.
Shravan, you want to go now?
Sure. No one else. Okay. I think a lot of the
other people can join in. That's whenever. Bolo.
I think a lot of the for me it was kind of a bit of a jarring thing to see like something like Bauhaus architecture come before Bauhaus, because normally I would associate all this like, oh, Bauhaus ne kiya, or this is all the death of ornateness and coming after that. But it actually makes sense that it was kind of born in Russia, because if anyone had to reject like opulence and ornate decorations, and focus more on the planar, the form, it would be like Russian architects, because the whole political kind of thought going on there. It makes perfect sense that kind of was born there. And I think this was like very, I'm getting a strong kind of sense of brutalism more than modernism actually, with the kind of square forms stacked with each other, because you see more of the surface than you see of the form.
No, I think that it's I know as people who've been trained in a certain way and a certain imagination of history, we like to imagine there to be a sort of seminal moment or a seminal person, that like, oh, yahan se shuru hua. We have this imagination that it'll be nice to have that, but that is very rarely so. We are all, including people like Corbusier, who very people are all born within certain contexts with certain sorts of energies around them. So nothing is born out of a void, really. And and I think that it's important to acknowledge the fact that there are moments when some things come together, so that creates energies through which many people seem to kind of think about similar things. So I would say that there are parallel ideas that are happening, like when Ornamentist Crime is written in 1910. Okay, but even before that, there are proto-modernist movements which are in many ways thinking about cleaning things up, trying to find the pure rather than the decorative. So it's I think it's part of what happens with modernity. When the idea of a modern human being is imagined as one that doesn't need to be protected from the world, because he can confront the world because he has science on his side, then automatically it's imagined that clarity is the key. And when clarity becomes the key, there is this need to, um, you know, uh, remove ornament, I guess. It seems to be the logical choice. I mean, so I think that this tendency towards the Spartan um, is something that you'll find in many different movements around the world at that time. Even I mean, that way, if I think about it, something like the Larkin building by Frank Lloyd Wright is also being built in the same period. No? It's kind of huge volumes with the central void that's open. And the brutalism question, now that's a very kind of tricky term, the brutalism term. I need to do a little bit more research on it, but for me, the brutalism as in the way that it calls itself, at least, emerges, I think, in the 50s and the 60s, primarily in Britain, in that entire world. And over there, it has another function, actually. It seems to take upon a sort of social cause, um, and it's building buildings of housing and public spaces, etc. But I don't want to kind of go down there, because I think I really need to do a little bit more research on that. For me, it's people like Peter and Alison Smithson, whose Robin Hood Gardens represents the brutalism. We'll come to them, I think, next year when you come into the third year. We'll be looking a little bit at that particular period of utopian thinking, I think.
I also think there's a lot of like the influence. I don't know how the influence went or came from, or if it's two different things, but there's a similarity to the German impressionism, in the sense that man is being put before like this idea of God. Like there's this, I don't know, it's not, obviously it's not very direct, but you can see this idea of like putting a man before like any other like imagery or something. I mean, you have that clearly in the black square covering where Jesus was
very much so. I mean, I mean, even now, religious thought is, I mean, like somebody told me, I think the other day, I think, was it Shirish? You said that the fastest growing religion on earth right now is atheism. So there are a lot of people who are currently, moving away from God. And I think that is something that starts, I think, mid 19th century in a great way across this entire world, where God is not taken for granted. It may exist, but and the modern man is then free from that sort of superstition, as it were, or mythology, as it is imagined. We of course know from the current state of affairs around the world, and especially in India, that sort of move away into atheism is not smooth. It's full of ups and downs and oscillations.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, I got very Solaris kind of vibes from like the crowns and everything that was coming. I don't know if that it's the same kind of art form kind of continuing.
I'll tell you what I find that sometimes, no, Shirish, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if I think so much of our design processes that I have seen Not at the school I studied at. LS Raheja was a functionalist school. So it was make the bubble diagram and allow things to kind of emerge. But I think the more avant-garde kind of schools, KRVI's early years, especially, I think in the first era, Sen Kapadia's era, I think these processes, now the purely compositional processes, where the architecture was imagined as a compositional imagination, not even lived environment, but compositional exercise. Via somebody like, let's say, Zaha Hadid or what's his name, Peter Eisenman, no, that purely compositional imaginations. Or maybe Eisenman and Zaha need to be kept out of this for now, but this idea of composition and free composition as something that generates architecture continues to happen even today at the school.
Yeah, Ron, I think we should we very often think of the design studio as the architecture design studio, but we should look at the basic design studios because I find that, at least in my education, it was primarily in the basic design studios that these compositional kind of ideas were sort of placed forefront. The other studios still sort of I mean, we were not given the room to think outside the box. In the sense, the first 2 years we were told what the sizes of windows should be, okay, what kind of windows have to be there, okay, and then you were given area statements. So then you are confined basically to certain ways of creating forms. But it was in the basic design exercises where compositional ideas were definitely at the forefront. So you played with, you created patterns, you created what are called motifs, which turned into patterns, which turned into borders, for example, like exercises like that. Why did they turn into, why were we asked to turn into borders? Who knows? Okay. But they all look like picture frame borders for some reason. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's.
I think what seems to be interesting for me when I'm thinking about the suprematist imagination is that it's not even the Bauhaus imagination that says that there is a sort of functional or even an expressive imagination that is at the heart of it. It's like function ko bhi nikal diya, okay, ornament ko to nikal hi diya. ये तो है ही नहीं, body तो है ही नहीं, तो there is no scale, right? So there is no sense of experience anyway. What is the key, I think, for us to think about the suprematist is the self-referentiality of it. It has no other reference except itself. मैं painting, I'm not a painting of anything else. I am merely a painting. Okay. And even the drawings are like that. So there's a sort of freedom to the cuboids of the Brown or the cuboids of the Architecton as they're kind of playing around with themselves. And that kind of internalized dialogue that architecture has with itself, that these are my parts and I'll play around with myself, well, sounds obscene, but that idea that architecture is only about itself, and that is what the fundamental imagination of architecture is. So even today, when you have when you're talking about basic design, the idea is that for the first year, students need to understand architectural language, and architectural language can only be understood if you remove all other references except itself. So it's imagined that you learn language in isolation, in a void, like as if the architectural language has nothing to say except I am architecture. So एक क्यों बनना चलता रहता है.
Yeah. But Rohan, then you get you can get easily branded as postmodern, if you think like how you are thinking right now. Okay. Yes. Meaning then you will be asked questions of like the fact that, and this has happened in Kamla Reja also, right? The first second year studios consistently and increasingly have been seen as actually sort of what are called element studios,
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
The element studios basically.
What I find very curious is that the people who kind of speak of these studios very rarely know the history through which this is. If you know that this is coming from a very particular kind of history, then you know that they are not part of that history. So why should we follow those? Understand? We've just simply imbibed them as natural things. ऐसे ही होता है बाबा, architectural language ऐसे ही होता है. But you have to understand that this process belongs to another imagination of architecture entirely, which may or may not be relevant to us. But we never ask that question. We just take the process because that's what we assume is the truth. Ria has a question, I think. Ria?
Yeah, Ria, go ahead.
Hi, so it reminded me of the project that we did in the first sem. It was about, for the first class, we were asked to make these cubes out of, these white cardboard sheets of, and imagine them to be spaces of 3 into 3 meters, and imagine those and then make a composition out of those cubes. That happened in the first sem. It was really vague and it was a short assignment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But at least you had a scale. Sometimes these are done even without scale. But you're right. It's exactly the same thing. The idea that one can remove all context and just play with pure form. I find that to be an interesting process. I'm not convinced by it personally. But well, to each his own, I guess.
Yeah, but the thing is that we are so fascinated with the drawings that we make. Okay, that very often, and it has happened with everyone. You suddenly look at your drawing, and somebody will come and say that, "Arre, kya diagram ban gaya yaar, tere project ka." Okay, but it's like there is kind of the fetish of the diagram into architecture. Okay, is another. I mean, it's a separate set of conversation, and I'm thinking about it because because we are both me and Janila are preparing the lecture for tomorrow, which is on the vernacular. And I was reading Amos Rapoport, House Form and Culture, where he in one of the sentences he says that sorry boss, form does not follow material. Okay, no. Okay, you can't say like I can create the same form in 4 different materials. Okay, correct. So don't don't and vernacular architecture displays to you. Okay, so the tectonic which is there, he separates the tectonic from the diagram.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is something what Aldo Rossi would do actually.
Yeah. So anyways, this we'll discuss tomorrow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I find it to be like this, and I think, I think it's important also when you see that black square painting, for example, to not say, isme kya hai? That is a classic, abstract art, usme kya hai? Actually, it's doing something else than what you expect from painting. So that is to be understood a little bit. Concept hai kaam mein. Anyone else wants to join in, or should we then kind of meet next week to finish the Soviet avant-garde, where we will be looking at the constructivists? I think this is a nice, I know that we have a lot to go through, so we tend to overfill the classes with things, but what to do? Life's like that, man. This is okay.
I think it's also interesting when we look at the cube exercise, we were actually like designing purely based on form. When we did our Ahmedabad AD second year, we always had some sort of context to design with, and we were always concerned about the climate, we were concerned about other things. But that cube exercise, we're just kind of playing with this idea of somewhere. It could be anywhere. We design the context. There is no context. I like it as art, but as architecture, I'm not really sure because
I don't know what. Okay, let me say this. What does it mean as far as art is concerned?
I mean, architecture is
no. Forget the architecture. I understand your issue, but even as far as art, what is the purpose of it?
I liked it because it was just pure design. Like, sure, we had a scale to it, but at the end of the day, it was just form. It was experience. It wasn't really anything about
But it was form experience.
Yeah, we just
Ron, it was suprematist, I mean,
exactly.
In the sense that just that a black square is a black square, and I mean, I guess it was that. Sure, right?
Yeah, like we were probably instructed also not. I think we were instructed was not to make any specific path around it. So there were no stairs. There was no this. There was just levels. There was
these projects. No, these. So when they come to the third year, Shirish, okay, the first 4 or what? First entire semester only goes in telling them that architecture is not cubes. Okay. Right now, because we were in a lockdown mode, even now I had a jury day before yesterday where I'm telling these people architecture is not about a cuboidal composition, for God's sake. It's so easy also, to make these compositions and think that you're doing architecture. Yeah, like मैंने बना दिया ना, अभी मैं उस पर मटेरियल रेंडर करूंगा ऐसे, क्योंकि वो SketchUp अलाउ करता है ना. So these are horrible buildings. My God, I was in trauma.
But Ron, a lot of it still has to do with the fact that we still, as a design process, we still operate with form follows function.
No, or the
so
form follows emptiness. Kuch bhi. Form follows itself. So I can keep doing time pass for it. There's no reference.
Yeah, but but then you will attach a function to that, na?
After that you put function in it like that. So this becomes that, this cube becomes that, this cube. It's maddening. I go crazy. It's like you have to de-learn.
And also पहले plan आता है, ठीक है? हाँ, फिर उसके extrusions आते हैं. Okay. Where then, I mean, it's the way it's the way we process the entire thing also, no? Like
true, very true.
And I think in the first 2 years, the idea should be to break open those processes critically, and then, I mean, that's just me, but anyways.
Anyway, I think we should end for today, unless anyone has something kind of really important to say. You guys have had a long day. I mean, this is the one lecture after another. I have made Rutika promise that they will not extend the classes next time. We always get a break between this one and the earlier one. So we'll see you next Thursday then. Next Wednesday for the rest of the Soviet avant-garde. And I think after that we have around 3 lectures. Shirish, is that right?
I think no, we have more. We will be finishing 8 lectures.
All right. So then we need to. So maybe we can think of something.
We have 4 lectures, or 12 we have to do, na? Total. That's what they.
This will become 13. So I think Corbusier will take up 2, I think, again, because that's also a lot. So I think we'll have around 6. I think 6 more lectures are there.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Bye, guys. See you.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.